I'm trying to position myself, so I'm going to have the Julie's certificate for the MoFlow.
Oh, you still got it. Good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that still exists.
The only officially trained person on the MoFlow.
Yep.
And it might be the only thing, the only remaining artifact that indicates any credibility that I have in the field of cytometry, had in the field of cytometry, that gives me like an entree even to being part of the ChUG podcast series.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ChUG podcast. My name is David Leclerc. I am technical director of the CAT facility at the University of Chicago. I am here with Ryan Duggan, who is senior scientist at AbbVie. And our guest today is Julie Auger, OJ, who is the executive director at the RCFP at UCDavis. Julie, welcome and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for the invite. I am so glad to be back here with the ChUGgers. And I do feel I did watch your most recent podcast with Prateep, and I feel that my last name should get at least as much airtime with regard to the conversation as Prateep's did.
I know. Yeah. It's not the best way to start a podcast by mispronouncing people's names. But...
Well, and of course, David, you are uniquely qualified as a French Canadian to know how to properly pronounce my last name.
I remember many discussions between you and I on how to properly pronounce your name.
Exactly.
Nobody really knew. But
wait, so it's not pronounced Auger? All these years I've been saying it wrong? Oh no.
That's right. So for the record, it is Auger. It is the French pronunciation, carried on from Quebec by my French Canadian grandfather, who struggled with it his entire life that he spent in the U.S. And passed that legacy of struggle down to me. So
does it mean the same in French Canadian as it does in English? Like, a tool that drills holes?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Actually, what does it mean in French?
I'm not quite sure it has a meaning. Auge would be a bucket that your farm animals drink from. Auger, I don't think Auger means that, so I'm not sure.
I was told one time that it referred to individuals or a group of people in Alsace-Lorraine who lived in homes that were carved out of the sides of hills. So they were basically holes dug into the sides of hills. And the individuals who lived in them were called Augers.
I will go with that.
I have no idea. It kind of makes me sound like I should be a badger or a mole or a gopher or something.
So our eagle-eyed viewers might notice that there's some kind of a close connection between all three of us. That is because Julie used to be the boss of both Ryan and I, and still is in a certain point of view. And Ryan used to be my boss as well. So everybody used to be my boss.
That's right, as it should be. Yeah, I was trying to think the other day and thinking about this podcast. I'm pretty sure Julie is the person I've known outside of my family, the person I've known the longest.
Nice.
That I still, have contact with. Like,
wow.
September 97, I started working in your lab at UChicago. Way back when.
Oh, yeah.
So that's like almost 24 years.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
That's like most of your life because you're Ryan.
It is still at this point a majority of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's impressive. That is impressive. I don't think I would have been able to pull out the date because I came to the University of Chicago in 1993, and I feel like you'd always been there. So I can't imagine what I did for 4 years until you got there, actually. They must have been really rough years on me,
Oh
because
yeah, I'm sure.
I know things improved dramatically once you arrived.
Well, yeah, I
So-
mean, I think that's the well, I mean, very different era in terms of like how technologies were handled and the like even the whole concept of a core facility, I think was relatively new. I don't know. We'll have to talk about the history of that too. But
Well,
yeah, I mean, that was like, in the era of basically a couple of PIs get together and say, hey, let's buy an instrument type of thing.
Yeah.
let's start here actually. So we got Julie here because Julie is the, how should I say this, the one of the architect of the Office of Shared Research Facility here at the University of Chicago, which is the administrative branch of all things core facilities. And I think we discussed it a little bit. I don't think that structure existed before you got involved. So let's start there. Like, how did you come to be in that kind of position? What's the early step you took, or what did your early career look like?
Sure. Well, I'm glad you're not going to make me start all the way back in my childhood. 'Cause
Well,
that
if you want to, I mean,
yeah, no, that
it's
not
relevant.
not that interesting. The only thing I will say is when I left, I was when I left college, I had just, after I graduated, I had decided that I wanted at least a year or two of experience before I decided what my next step was going to be. My original thought was, when I started college, I was a pre-med student. I very quickly learned medicine was not my route. Research was where it's at. That's where inquiring minds need to be. And so when I was finished with college, I put in an application to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, which was near where I went to school in Minnesota. And I applied for any type of entry-level position in a research laboratory. And I specifically stated on my application, no clinical lab, please.
Oh,
I knew that clinical laboratory routine testing was not going to be something that suited me well. I was asked to interview and was hired into a laboratory that was an electron microscopy facility originally, which had 3 or 4 years prior acquired a flow cytometer. So I basically fell into flow cytometry by accident. And the rest is history, as they say. At the Mayo Clinic, I was there for a year, and we were doing, this was 1984. We were doing research work on a FAX4, and we were also a Becton Dickinson FAX4. And some of the work was research, but there was also some clinical samples that came in. And I was reminded of this when I was listening to Prateep's podcast. We had samples that would come in to the laboratory that were labeled as, they were all whole blood samples. Some of them would be labeled as infectious. 1984, the very start of the AIDS epidemic. So as it turns out, we didn't know what those samples were. We just knew, we were told they were infectious. But we'd double glove, run the samples and move on. Most of them were from hepatitis patients, but some of them were from HIV infected individuals. And we were doing basic T and B cell subsets on that. So that's my one remote link to Prateep and his earlier conversation with the group about how he got into flow cytometry and his early days of flow cytometry. But a year into my work at the Mayo Clinic, the director of that laboratory moved to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign and asked some of us that were working in that laboratory to relocate with him. And I was in a fortunate position where I could be able to do so. And so I did. And that was actually where I first found my first introduction into a centralized administrative structure for core facilities. This was in 1985. The University of Illinois had created a biotechnology center, which had, I know of at least 3 facilities. One was an EM facility, a standalone flow cytometry facility, and a monoclonal antibody facility. And I think there was at least 1, maybe 2 other cores that were under this umbrella of the biotech center. It was administered by a woman named Dr. Janet Glazer, who was terrific and in hindsight turned out to be a terrific mentor for me. I think that was one of the earliest true kind of centralized administrative structures that was focused only on core facilities. It wasn't within a department. It wasn't, it was just its own thing. So you could kind of say I was kind of born into it, into this concept right out of college. I spent 8 years at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, and then was told about the position that was open at the University of Chicago to run their flow cytometry facility. And I said, I don't think so. I really was not interested. At the time, the flow facility was under the direction of Jeff Bluestone. Ryan, you certainly remember Jeff. David, I don't know if Jeff was still at the University of Chicago when you arrived.
I think I've ever met him. Okay.
But he was, at the time, I think that maybe the chair of the Committee on Immunology. Jeff is a very, very persistent individual. And I had been recommended to him by an individual named Dave Kennedy, who is still in cytometry, I believe.
Yeah.
What company does Dave work for?
Yeah, he's with Cytec now.
Cytec. So yeah, so Dave was ultimately, Dave and his wife, I can't remember her name, Mary, maybe? I think she worked for BD. They were ultimately responsible for introducing me to Jeff and Jeff's persistent ways. And when I said, nope, I'm not interested, and Jeff said, come on, just drive up, see what you think about it. If nothing else, it's a trip to Chicago. We'll show you what's going on in Chicago. And I'm like, I'm really not interested in Chicago. That's a hell of a big city, right? I'm a small country girl from Wisconsin. Why do I want to live in Chicago? But I took the drive up and I was smitten. I was like, this is one of the best immunology groups in the country. The science that was happening was really great. So as much as I loved my laboratory in Urbana, I decided to make the change and moved 2 hours north to Chicago.
And that, I mean, speaking of the science going on, I mean, that was the era of like the seminal CTLA-4 discoveries and papers and stuff coming out right at that time, right? So it's definitely a good time to make that jump, because things just kind of blew up after that.
Exactly. Yeah, that was 1993 when I moved to Chicago. The laboratory at that time was in, gosh, I can't remember the name of the building, but it was in the main hospital complex.
Billings,
that's right.
G320.
G320, that's right. We had, when I started at the Mayo Clinic, I had a BD Bax4, I told you. And then when at the University of Illinois, they had purchased, just before I arrived, 3 Coulter Epix instruments, a 751, a 752 or 3 with a dye laser system on it with rhodamine 6G dye laser, and then an Epix C. And then 8 years later, when I got to the University of Chicago, they were back to BD instrumentation again. So we had 3 instruments, I think, at that time in G320, maybe 4, 1 or 2 fact scans, 1 sorter that they had just purchased, and maybe 1 old Epix instrument that they were getting rid of. But it was just down the hall from Hans Schreiber's lab. I understand Hans is still, his lab is still pretty active. Down around the corner from Jeff Bluestone's lab and Frank Fitch's lab. Andrea Sant's lab was around the corner. Jim Miller, no, Jim was in Cummings, and Jose Quintans were the faculty, immunology faculty there.
And so was that an actual like core facility as we know it, or was it, or what was kind of the structure at that point?
It was a core facility, but it was, I think it was underutilized. And I think that the demand was growing because there was just, the immunology community there was growing. And so I remember days when I would have, things were booked back to back, and things got so busy with people that had questions about their data or about designing their experiments that I had a small office inside that laboratory, and people would line up actually out into the lab and then out into the hallway.
Wow.
I was like,
I never had that.
come on, people. It's but it was a time when things were really developing, I think. So it was a pretty interesting time and a pretty busy time to be there. Yeah. But it was just the flow cytometry lab. That's what I was responsible for, was developing the flow cytometry lab and establishing, more routine services, more, I think more routine access for individuals to get insight and expertise into developing their assays and into understanding their data.
At that point, there was no centralized administration, I assume, at the University of Chicago?
Correct.
Right.
So there were other core facilities in existence, right? Like genomics probably, and then immunohistochemistry and monoclonal antibody, stuff like that, right?
Yes. So what is the camp today at the University of Chicago started as, there was the flow cytometry lab, and then some of the research, I was able to do some research with Jeff Bluestone's lab group kind of on the side, right? Which was one of the real reasons that I was excited to be in Chicago. But we utilized the pathology department's immunohistochemistry lab at the time. And it was a facility that was deeply in debt and continued to go deeply in debt. It didn't really have a strong administrative structure. It had a practice, which we know today is a bad practice, of trading service for authorship on publications. So trading service for, in the name of collaboration, but then that meant that the facility couldn't cover its costs. And the department chair at that time said, we're going to shut this down. We can't afford to support the research enterprise in this way. We were using that immunohistochemistry facility a lot in some of the studies that I was doing. And so we said, well, how about if you shut it down? But in a few months, let's think about how to revitalize it and restructure it. And then I'll take it on as, under the administrative wing, because we have now this great administrative model that works for flow cytometry. We have rates. We don't give anything away. We don't trade anything for authorship. You know, service is service, and people have to pay for it.
How was that change? Like, how did the PIs take to that? You know, they're probably used to getting this trade value, putting the tech on their paper in order to get services for free. Now they actually have to fit this into their budget, into their grant writing. Yeah. Was there much pushback with that?
What I've learned over the years, and this is not only at Chicago, but in every institution that I've set up an administrative structure or developed a new core facility at, is that change from an informal structure of a shared resource to one where it's a formal, here's a service, you'll pay us for that service. The researchers respond really well to that, but it comes with a completely different set of expectations from them, right? So when it's a collaboration or it's a trade, we'll give you this for that, they're much more patient in terms of timing, right? They're much more amenable to the collaborative discussion, right? But when it becomes a service and they're paying for it, it's just like when you take your car in for service work, right? To the dealer or to the mechanic. You have a certain level of quality expectation that comes with that now because you're paying for that service. I found that to be the case in every single facility that I've ever been involved with in terms of developing. And that's the toughest thing, I think, for most institutions to manage is most core facilities develop as informal shared operations. Somebody gets a piece of technology or hires an expert and then share them among their friends or colleagues. Then it develops into something that needs a more formal structure. When I take my car to the mechanic or to the dealership and they're doing some service work on it, I expect them to fix it, high quality, and I expect it to come back with a car wash.
Exactly. What's the equivalent of a car wash in a flow cytometry service? I don't know.
I don't know what it is.
PowerPoint figures or something like that?
I don't know what it is, but I know when I don't get it, I'm a little upset.
Yeah.
So you get so you get to run essentially two cores, like the monoclonal and the flow cytometry.
The immunohistochemistry.
Immunohistochemistry, yes.
Chemistry and flow cytometry. Mm-hmm. At that time, the monoclonal antibody facility was part of the what was that center that was on the in the BSLC that was run by Craig Thompson.
I don't know.
And they studied autoimmunity. I can't remember the Lupus Center.
Oh right. Yeah, it could be something like that.
Ryan, we've been at this for too long.
Too long, yeah.
Craig Thompson said, you know what, we've got this monoclonal antibody facility and I'm tired of managing it. I don't want to deal with the administration of it. And I have to keep underwriting it. Can you apply the same business model that you have to flow cytometry and are now going to apply to immunohistochemistry to monoclonal antibody technology? And I said, sure, why not? Business is business, administration is administration. We'll just take that one into, but I did make Craig, who is the director of I think it was the Lupus Center, guarantee that he would underwrite the operations for at least 3 years, because I felt that we needed to make sure we had enough time to make those changes that you just alluded to, Ryan, that are necessary to make in the user community, and get them accustomed to paying the appropriate fees for the services. So that's
sorry about that. So like, it seems like the model for flow cytometry, well, I mean, I'm biased here, but it seems pretty straightforward. You have the cost of operating it, you have hourly users, split up the costs, boom, you got your rate and apply it.
Exactly.
But yeah, immunohisto and monoclonal seem a little bit more unique in that regard, or do you think you're able to just apply the model as is without much modification?
It was really pretty straightforward. So you can tell the one thing that linked the three facilities was antibodies, right? Flow cytometry used them, monoclonal antibody produced them, and immunohistochemistry was dependent on them as the marker as well. The difference between developing a rate structure for an instrument where you're charging by the hour for utilization and an assay or a service-based core just requires that you look at the expenses in a different way. But it still is the unit of service that you're selling is just different. You're selling a monoclonal or a product, right? Or you're selling a set of slides, right, that you've done, or you're selling an hour of flow cytometry time. So from my perspective, the administrative and financial perspective really was pretty much the same. I think, though, that what was really helpful to me was the University of Chicago had, the University of Chicago Business School had some business courses available through their executive education program that I had access to at no cost. It was an incredible benefit to me. The first course that I saw advertised that I thought was really key, and I still think is key to my sanity, was called Financial Analysis for Non-Financial Managers.
Nice.
Brilliant. It was brilliant. I mean, the title says it all, right? So I took that and learned how to really look at a spreadsheet, a financial spreadsheet. And then I subsequently took more management classes and more financial classes through the business school, and that was very helpful as well. But it wasn't until I think that model that we started in probably 95, 96, 97. When you arrived, Ryan, were the three facilities all operating as one?
It was just starting. So I think probably, in that 97 range, right?
Right.
That's when we kind of gave it the name, the Immunology Applications Core Facility umbrella for the three labs, right?
Exactly. So we managed it in that way for until the year 2000. And Janet Rowley, who was a brilliant scientist and a brilliant individual, was acting as interim dean of the Biological Sciences Division. And she recognized the importance of core facilities and shared research facilities. And she had conversations with Bob Zimmer, who was then the provost of the University of Chicago, and managed to get, I want to say, $8 million commitment from Zimmer, and matched it with a $5 million commitment from the Biological Sciences Division for investment in core facilities. And that was the watershed moment at the University of Chicago that then created the administrative structure that was necessary to manage that. Because Janet, in her wisdom, said, we will make this investment, but we're going to make sure that we tell the faculty and the research community that we cannot do this without a professional administrative structure to support it. And that's when the Office of Shared Research Facilities was created.
Wow, that's pretty cutting edge at that time. That's a lot of money. Was that mostly for, well, of course, setting up the administrative office, but was any of it for like capital or new core creation, stuff like that?
Almost all of it was for capital and new cores or operating subsidy new cores. I think that we just had, such visionary leadership at that time that she was able to secure that, recognizing that core facilities do require subsidy. They do require operating support and they require capital investment. But to do that without having any kind of accountability or administrative structure to manage it appropriately, or to know what that money is going to be used for, or to even help assess how well that investment worked, 3 years later, she recognized that we needed to have a structure to support that. So in 2000, that was created, and I was asked if I would expand again my administrative abilities to the broader biological sciences division, not just the 3 cores in the immunology applications core.
And so obviously being pulled in this administrative role, so certainly, you're adept at that kind of thinking and whatnot. So, but obviously that pulls you out of the lab.
Exactly.
So yeah, what were your thoughts about that? I mean, was that a consideration? And
it was a huge consideration, and as you both know, that year, I think it was that year that we had just gotten new instrumentation in the flow core. I think that's when the MoFlow arrived, and I think that's the certificate that hangs behind it.
Yep, there it is.
For MoFlow training or certified operator for the MoFlow, I think is dated in 2000. I'm not
It's
sure.
gotta be. It's gotta be
2001.
2001 probably.
2001. I finished that training. We got the MoFlow installed. And I think that, within 3 months, I'm pretty sure, Ryan, you didn't let me go near the instrument anymore.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. It has to happen that way sometimes, right?
yeah.
I mean, luckily you passed on all your wisdom, trained me up, so I was able to run the instrument. But yeah, that's one of those things, if you don't use it, you definitely lose it. So
Absolutely. Yeah, it wasn't very long after that training that I was kind of banned from the lab. So, but it was a tough decision for me to make. Let me see. Was it tough? It was a sad decision to make. I don't think it was a tough decision. I love being in the lab. I still love cytometry. I still am a member of ISAC, and I still go to the cyto meetings. But I knew that my inherent talents, the ones that I was born with and the way that my mind works, was actually better suited to organizational administration than it was to research in the laboratory.
It doesn't sound like you had much of a choice at that point. You were already managing 3 cores and you were just being asked to take more and more and more. So you could have said, well, no, but then that kind of meant the end of that particular.
That would have meant somebody else would have come in and had done that. And then I would have had to work for somebody.
Yeah.
That would have just sucked too.
But also, I mean, that kind of points to, and this is, I know, something that you worked hard to implement at UChicago, is just like a job track, like progression for technical people in the workplace. I mean, basically, if you want to rise to a higher level, you have no choice really, at least especially at that time, but to be administratively involved, as opposed to, you get to the technical director level and then you've plateaued.
Right.
There's really nothing beyond that you can do. So I mean, yeah, I mean, definitely it suits your skill set and everything else, but plus career advancement, especially at that time, was a little bit of a dead end for just the technical people in the labs.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I found, though, is that it really spoke to me as a it spoke to the part of me that liked to create things, right? And build things, right? So, and I when I look back, I kind of see that that's where a lot of things that I've done are about change, right? And change management, and how do we help organizations evolve, right? And move things to a different, presumably better structure or place, right? I think that not I think I saw that I was uniquely suited and uniquely experienced at the University of Chicago to take on that role of creating the OSRF at that time. There wasn't anybody else who had the experience with multiple core facilities that I had. And so it just seemed like it was kind of meant to be, right? And so I agreed to do that. And there was resistance. I mean, you probably don't remember this, Ryan, but there were cores in the BSD who were not interested in being part of a central organization. Centralization was like a dirty word, right? It meant you were going to take away their academic freedom. It meant you were going to take away their scientific freedom. It meant that we were going to, I remember getting questions like, are you going to make all of our websites look the same? I was like,
look at them now.
Like, I don't care what your website looks like as long as it has 5 things on it: who you are, what you do, where you're located, how much you cost, and I can't even remember the 5th one. But if it serves those functions, that's all I care about, right? I'm not.
I remember at the time, maybe you could talk a little bit more about this. I think the word that you used in building it was federated model.
Yeah.
Right. So that seemed to maybe help quell some of those fears.
It did, until and that actually worked quite well at the University of Chicago. When I left and went to UC, and when I left the University of Chicago in 2010, 10 years later, I went to UCSF. The word federated didn't go over very well because it sounded too much like the federal government.
Mm.
So it's really all context dependent and culture dependent on where you are, right? So while I was in San Francisco, I started using the word coordinated administrative structure, right?
It's less Star Trek.
Better than federated, because we're not federal government. I couldn't use socialized, right? But, because socialism carries such baggage with it. But coordinated seems to work well. So.
But maybe if you could just explain, like, in general, what the model is, or that you found to work best in the context of having lots of varied technologies, different personalities, integrating with PIs, getting support from the university and the department in total. Maybe just lay out like what that model looks like.
Sure. So I think today what I think what many organizations recognize now is that shared research facilities, core facilities, they go by so many different names, are very important research infrastructure pieces of a research institution. And that the shared model of very expensive technologies and highly sought after expertise is the best way to move scientific research forward. I think what institutions still struggle with is the fact that these organizations, core facilities, are really small businesses and operate in different ways than routine research laboratories do in an institution. And so what the organized coordinated, centralized, federated model of administration for core facilities does is recognizes all of those unique characteristics that are necessary for management, administrative management, to make a facility successful. So to support a core from a human resources perspective, right? Job satisfaction, recruitment, of very talented and highly sought individuals, where you're always competing with biotechnology or small pharma or large pharma in academic environments. HR specialization, specialized approaches to HR for core facilities is something that needs specialized attention. Financial management, including recharge development, right? Rate development, pricing policies, all of the various costs associated with running a shared operation, as well as utilization, monitoring utilization, understanding volume, and actually doing market forecasting, right? Yep. Nobody in a research lab does market forecasting. Nobody in a research lab knows what the hell market forecasting is. But in a core facility, that kind of forecasting in terms of where we're going to be 5 years from now is incredibly important. And so in addition to having a core facility structure, you need to have an administrative core facility that understands the unique challenges of these scientific business operations in what are usually non-for-profit settings. And I think that continues to develop, and a lot of organizations are still trying to grapple with how do they do that best. I see that with a lot of colleagues who are defining new structures at new institutions all the time. No, new structures at old institutions.
Right.
That's what I meant to say. I do think that the cores benefit because they benefit from some specialized attention, right? Somebody who understands their pain, right? They also benefit from advocacy and somebody understanding their the financial challenges and the financial structure and the impact of market fluctuations, and then can make informed pleas or informed requests to the stakeholders, whether they're the executive leadership of the organization, the deans, the provosts, the presidents, the whomever, to say this is where investments need to be made and this is why, so that the investments aren't made only where the loudest voice is screaming, but are made where the biggest impact is going to be made for the largest and broadest group of individuals. And cores can't do that on their own.
And do you think, maybe this goes without saying, but only when you've kind of lived in a core and have experienced some of those pains do you really understand the need, which is why, like, I don't know if you remember, GLIFCA or ISAC core facility or core management meetings, right? It was always kind of everybody talking about their woes of being asked to do all these management things, HR, budgets, financial stuff. I think because of that, especially in a situation with like you or Johnny, others in those positions, can kind of take those pain points and develop something that would work. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, it works kind of across technologies and things like that, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest advantage, and I really think I'll go on the record for saying this, although some of my colleagues, it's not a rule because, and you'll see why in a minute, but I do think that to be if I had not had the scientific experience that I had, I didn't have the ability to do some research at the bench. I didn't have the time spent in the laboratory, in the core facility. I would not be an effective administrator of core facilities today. I would not be effective in my position, because you have to be able to understand, like you said, Ryan, the pains of being in the lab and how science actually operates in these facilities, as well as understand the financial tools, the financial realities, the HR processes, the policies, the laws that we have to follow, so that you can actually bridge the two together. And in the organizations that I see that struggle the most is there is no bridge, right? You've got this administrative set over here that's saying play by these rules, and you've got the scientists, the technical scientists over here saying, but those rules don't work for us. We don't fit that model. So I do have some colleagues that are in positions similar to mine that I think did come from non-scientific backgrounds, but they've been astute enough and spent enough time, really boots on the ground, talking with the core scientists and understanding what their pain points are and how they operate, and why they can't fit into normal practices and administrative approaches. So, but that's what I think that's has been extremely helpful to me in my career. And that's why the science has always remained so important to me. The mission is the science. The mission is the research, right? The administration is just, how do we get there? And how do we make sure that the research dollars we have are spent most effectively and most efficiently to within that context of academic freedom and scientific creativity.
I want to ask a bit about how do you dig a bit deeper in what the administrative branch of these core facilities do, like basically judging the quality of the work done in different cores or the different emerging technologies, or realizing when it's time for sunsetting technologies to just disappear. What's the process here?
Oh, geez, sunsetting. Does it ever even happen? I don't know. I think for me, the process is one of constant conversation, right? And it does require evaluation. So it does require a set of metrics, performance metrics, if you want, but those metrics actually need to be different from core to core. Not every technology works within the same metrics, right? So I think things that are important are the user base. Is the user base increasing? Is the user base stable? Is the user base decreasing, right? That's actually the first thing that can really tell you about the health of a facility. The other thing that can tell you something pretty quickly about a facility is, where is it in its life cycle? Is it new? Is it a technology that's been around for 3 years? Or is it a technology that's been around for 25 years, right? And where does the facility fall in its life cycle? New, midlife, end of life, right? I think that core facilities have to, as we see that cores are getting into midlife, and that's when they're most sustainable on their own, require less operating subsidy, but probably more capital investment, capital subsidy, than they do day-to-day operating subsidy. But they get to a point where, if they don't continue to evolve, they're going to definitely go on a sunset path, right? Because technologies will develop beyond them, and the user base will move with them, right? So cores have to be really careful about their own understanding of where their field is going. And if their field is declining, right, in terms of utility, they should be looking at what are new technologies, or not even the newest instruments, but new different approaches for like with flow cytometry for cell biology, or intracellular particle analysis. I mean, there's lots of different ways that the field has evolved, right? And so keeping up with the times, I think, is important. I do think, though, that cores need to have a 5-year plan. Every core should have a 5-year plan. It's a 5-year strategic plan, and it includes a 5-year financial plan, right? Just where you want to go scientifically and where you think the technology is going to go, what kind of instruments you want to buy over the next 5 years isn't sufficient. It's what kind of personnel do you need to support that? What kind of training opportunities or teaching opportunities do you want to include? What are there other areas that you can bring value to your organization, to the institution, right? How do you put those into your strategic plan? And then how do you pay for that, right? I think a lot of organizations like to go through that strategic plan of what they want to build in the next 5 years, but then they stop short of how to pay for it, right? And so that's the other piece, I think, that all of that has to be done in the context of what you're currently doing today, right? And what does the core need today?
Is that something you guide your course through, say that strategic planning? Because yeah, I mean, if somebody told me to make a strategic plan for my core, I'd say, what? How do I do that?
How do I do that? Exactly.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? But if you want usage metrics, I can give you that.
There you go.
If you want to know what my operating budget looks like every year, somebody can probably give you that, right? But
how often is that refreshed then? In
right.
that cycle.
Yeah. The other problem is, you know, I hear a lot about about core facilities who feel that they don't have enough funding. They don't have enough personnel. We're chronically understaffed, right? We just can't do everything that we need to do. Core facilities are actually are uniquely positioned to be to bring in more personnel, more so than researchers with research labs, because they have something that research labs don't have, and that's recharge revenue, right? Mm-hmm. So what they forget is that they can increase recharge rates to pay for the staff that the increased volume or increased demand requires, right? Or they may not even have to increase rates if they really believe the volume is going to increase that much, right? It'll pay for itself. But somebody has to help them with that financial modeling, right? And traditionally, departmental finance folks don't do that. They actually don't. They don't do that routinely, and so they don't think about how to do that. They do financial accounting. They do transactional accounting, right? They manage purchases, they manage expenses once they hit, but some of that strategic forecasting or modeling about how much are your rates going to have to increase, or how much is your volume going to have to increase to manage another FTE, right? Somebody should be there to be able to help to tell you what that number is, and then you can decide, oh, actually, we're never going to, our users will never pay that rate, or there isn't that much demand out there to justify that increase in volume, right? So, but without having those conversations, you can't make informed decisions about how to grow your laboratory. That's where a specialized administrative core or administrative structure is really helpful for core facilities, and actually essential, I think, and essential for an institution.
Yeah, because any like departmental administration is focused on like here's grant money coming in and here's our expenses going out,
Exactly.
which obviously we don't operate the same way in a core facility. What's the interactions then with say like a shared resource administrative staff and the rest of the administrative staff? I mean, is there collaboration in that regard as well?
There is. There's collaboration. Sometimes there's competition. Not so good. And it again, it depends on the organizational structure of the institution, right? So at Chicago, actually, as we developed that administrative structure, it was within the biological sciences division. And we had very strong support from the chief financial officers and the financial teams in the BSD, right, in the dean's office. And we built our own then administrative structure of finance folks and HR folks to help manage the specialized needs. So Chicago it was very, very well supported. Also at UCSF, because when I moved to UCSF, if you don't know, UCSF is only a biomedical campus. It has 4 professional schools, period. It has no undergraduates. It has nothing else. It has the School of Medicine, the School of Pharmacy, School of Dentistry, and the School of Nursing. And then it has a graduate school. But again, very much the same model as the Biological Sciences Division with the medical school at the University of Chicago. So culturally it was very similar, and had an administrative structure where I had to do a little bit more convincing that the team that we needed couldn't necessarily just fit into that existing financial administrative structure. The move to UCDavis has actually been quite different, because the position and the Research Core Facilities Program sits within the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research, which is a campus level position that works collaboratively with the dean's offices of 6 scientifically intensive colleges and schools. So there's the School of Medicine and the School of Vet Medicine, but then it also includes the College of Agriculture, the College of Biological Sciences, the College of Engineering, and the College of Letters and Sciences, which is where the hard sciences are, physics, chemistry, that sort of thing. And so, and each of those dean's offices has an administrative structure, and each of those departments in each of those colleges or schools has their administrative structure, and all of them have core facilities, and they all have very entrenched management structures and practices. And across those colleges and schools, the practices are diverse, right? And so central coordination is harder in this organization because it's so much larger. It's, 40,000 students. I mean, it's just a huge organization, right? That's historically been very decentralized and very siloed. But the deans are starting to work, since I've been here, I've been working in a very coordinated fashion, and are recognizing the benefits of sharing across colleges and schools rather than working only within their own. But so it's still collaborative, but it's still, and I don't want to say it's competitive. It's just so large. It's hard to get your arms around the whole thing, right? And so it will take many, many more years for that to completely evolve here at Davis.
Yeah, and I think, David, I think you mentioned this maybe in emails leading up to this. Maybe you can say this better than me, but from like a core facility personnel standard or stance, how do we make things how do we fit within this model so that we too are successful? And then there seems to be this growing need or push to kind of collaborate within or across core facilities.
Mhm.
David, I mean, I think maybe you could speak to this better, how maybe some
Right.
examples of how that's happening.
That was going to be my question to Julie as to what are the newer ideas coming out in the administrative field. But the general ideas that I see floating around is this idea of like a experimental pipelines where samples or experiments that move from one core to the next are followed in a way that the information just is not lost when it transits from one to the next. I'm thinking of single cell sequencing, for example. I don't know how many users come to my core, sort their cells, and then go to the sequencing core. And we never hear back from the quality of the results. And whenever somebody comes afterwards, we don't really have a good point of view on how we should modify our approach to improve the results. And it's actually Rob Solomon at the last CITO meeting at the core facility mentioned that, like, you presented 3 instances where he worked within an organization that had positioned the core so that they would work better together.
I think that we are seeing more of that when there are synergies. I got to say, frankly, I expect that to come from the cores themselves. I expect those kinds of structures to develop from the ground up, right? Nobody is in a better position to understand where those synergies can come from than the core directors, right? You guys know the technologies, you guys know the science. You don't want administrators saying, okay, you and you and you are now going to work together, figure it out, right? What I think works better is, and what I like to do is facilitate those conversations, right? So what I have learned over 35 years is that most core facilities are so busy and the personnel within them are so busy that they don't have time to go out beyond their discipline or their technology, right? So if centrally, I can provide a forum for them to come together, core directors meetings on a regular basis so that they at least get to know each other and know what their technologies are, then the conversations happen, right? That's when I started seeing, when I was in Chicago, more conversations and more synergy between flow cytometry and microscopy, for example, right? So I think that administrative structures need to develop those types of that type of infrastructure, whether it's, there's all kinds of ways to do it. But then it's ultimately the responsibility, and I think we're best served when the core directors say, hey, let's get together for a beer, let's get together over a glass of wine, or let's get together over ice cream, or let's just, go hang out on the quad for a bit in our masks and talk about, you have this, we both work with this particular faculty member. How can we, what are you doing with them? Here's what I'm doing with them. Are there ways that we can synergistically help their research programs better?
Right.
And then you bring that back to me and say, in order to do this, we really want to, co-locate our labs, or we want you to help us build an infrastructure that gives us the visibility of this pipeline that we're trying to build. Then I'm all for that, right? Just doesn't work well coming as a mandate, I think, from the top down.
I think the part of the question would be like if let's say technical directors found that synergy, would there be support to either for equipment or personnel? Like, I think, don't want to be putting words in your mouth, David, but I think you're saying something like if there would be almost like a project manager who would carry things from, help developing the assay with the researcher, pointing out that here's what you can do in the flow facility, here's what you can do in the genomics facility, connect those dots. So, I mean, maybe there would be like a part-time position or person who was part of a core, but also served a role as like a project manager who could take these synergistic ideas and formalize them a little bit more. What do you think about that?
Yeah, possibly. It would be like it would be like a scientific liaison.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I think if I were to put myself into that position, right, I think the challenge that I would have, and I challenge you both to put yourselves into the same position. I think for me, the challenge would be, I don't know enough about some of the other technologies or other areas of science to successfully make the right matches, right? I know enough about different areas, right? But even today, frankly, I'm still a cell biologist and immunologist at heart, right? And so every time that I have to talk with the genomics folks or the metabolomics folks, I'm like, molecules, they're not whole cell. I got to remember, you know, I mean, it's just, it doesn't roll off my tongue as easily. And so sometimes it would be hard, I think, for me to do that. I could do it between, you know, if I became expert in maybe 2 or 3 areas, but to do it across a large number of cores, to share one project liaison or a project manager across many cores might be difficult, I would think, but I don't know.
I want to put Laura in charge of this, really, so I don't have to.
What did you?
I want to put Laura in charge of this, really, so. But I don't know. So there's 2 things I was trying to fix with this idea. The one is just the efficiency of running such a complex experiment, but also just showcasing the technologies available in different core facilities. So for example, we just had a survey on the quality of the work done in my facility, and somebody complained that it's a shame we don't have a mass cytometer, which like we've been spending 5 years trying to like push usage on this instrument, and then now it's like it's a bit of a slap in the face to realize that people don't even know it's there. So these are the type of things that this position would also try to.
Oh, so you actually have it?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that actually is one area that I continue to do poorly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of organizations may do poorly, but maybe I only say that to save face for myself. Advertising, marketing, and communication, not my deal. Yeah. I do not have the talent for that. Likewise, I'm a terrible reporter, right? If I have to regurgitate what accomplishments we've made in the last year, can't do it. I'm already 6 months down the road, right? Ahead. It's really hard for me to look back. And so I recognize what my shortcomings are, but have had a real tough challenge actually engaging our marketing and communications teams, or in convincing somebody that hiring a core facility specific social media manager or marketing person is critical, right? Mm-hmm. And frankly, visibility for core facilities is really a critical piece. You really hit that nail on the head, David. I do it really poorly. It's always been a real weakness of mine.
You know what I think maybe the best form of advertising might be is getting yourself. I know this is hard to pull yourself away from the core facility, but getting yourself to works in progress meetings or seminars,
Yeah.
watching the science, watching what people are using, and then directly proposing to them, hey, I see you're doing this 18 color flow assay. Looks like you could use a few more colors. Why don't you try the CyTOF or the spectral cytometer or something like that? We can help you, stuff like that. I mean, where I am now, we don't have kind of the traditional core facility setup, although, I've taken pretty much everything I've learned from Julie throughout the years and tried to apply it, even in a pharmaceutical company setting. And yeah, I mean, that's basically how anything gets done. I say, okay, I see you have this application. Here's how I can help make it better. And if we don't have the technology, well, maybe this is a high enough priority experiment or project that we're working on that I can go to the administrators and say, hey, I need capital to buy this instrument to do this study for this project. So I know it seems like, and that's nothing new, right? I mean, that's kind of what people have said up and down the years in these different meetings. That, yeah, by you kind of injecting yourself into what's going on in the science, you can kind of become that liaison, both for your own core, but then again, interacting with other core directors, learning their technologies, what they have available, how they're useful, even being that liaison between multiple core facilities.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I think that's absolutely critical. Yep. Great approach.
We're approaching the end of the hour together. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to, any words of wisdom you wanted to share with the world.
Oh boy, I think my words of wisdom, I've never held back on my words of wisdom. So, but I can't produce them on demand.
I'm going to say this then. I'm going to finish up with a compliment. And this is just the quality of whenever you hire somebody, sometimes they make a huge difference in your environment. When I showed up at the University of Chicago, Julie had these happy hour in her office. And it kind of built a really unity around everybody who worked on the basement of the Kovler building. Everybody was really close together, chat all the time. And when you move to California, that kind of dissipated. Nobody really took on. And this is the quality of that you brought to the University of Chicago. Just this idea of like bringing people together, working as a team, working and enjoying the work that we do here. So,
well, I'm
grateful for it.
I'm really appreciative of those words, David. I have always thought that the best part of my job was the people, right? The people and the science. But you can't do the science without the people, right? And the teams that I've been able to, that I've been fortunate enough to work with over the years has just been really gratifying. So even though, we had a lot of wacky ideas, and there were a lot of things we did in the basement there of Kovler that I remember fondly, including some, our white elephant Christmas exchanges with some really interesting gifts that went around every year. I'm going to leave it at that. I mean, that really, that camaraderie was really critical for me too. And I think it's one of the things that I've recognized, why I used to say I could never work remotely, right? I could never work from home. I just wouldn't, I just felt that a team could not be successful working remotely. This past year has actually showed me I was wrong, right? We have still been able to be successful in doing our jobs here at UCDavis while working remotely. But I think you just reminded me of why I always said that and why this past year has even though we've been successful and been able to do it, it's been unsatisfying. And it's because you can't have those happy hours, you know, in the office together to just build that team, right? And build those memories that you have as an organization. And what makes you really successful as an organization is the teamwork. So I appreciate you saying that and reminding me, even though we've managed to come this far through this time of COVID, it still really sucked.
Yeah.
So, but thanks for the invite. I wish I could be there in the, you know, back room of some dark Chicago bar where ChUG started out.
Right.
Instead of, you know, here in my house with you guys. But I look forward to the time when we can all get together again.
Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Yeah, definitely. All right, now keep up the tradition. Don't throw away that certificate. Like I said, it's my only credibility into the world of cytometry still.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. Julie, thank you for your time. Ryan, thanks so much.
Thank
For
you.
listeners, it's lonely on YouTube, so let us know what you think of the podcast. Leave comments, and we'll see you later.
Bye, everyone.